Koreans are starting to agitate for change. Right? They want more economic freedom. They want more opportunity. They realise that their government cannot provide for them, which is the basic social contract in North Korea. Yes, we're repressive motherfuckers, but you won't starve. Well, once the last part of that sentence stops being true, then the first part becomes a really big problem. And so what we're going to do is we're going to tip it over the edge. Right? We reckon that if the international community shows its resolve now, if we send in some like crazy G.I. Joe motherfuckers to kill Kim Jong-il, people will rise up. Now, don't get me wrong, that's still a batshit crazy case. But if the topic says that's what you have to do, right, you have to argue for some attempt to change the regime in North Korea, then it's not your choice. What you have to do is try to make it as best as you can. And showing some trends, establishing the norms, and saying the tipping point's close, we need to just kind of push things over, is the way you make those unreasonable things seem far more reasonable, far more likely. And what we're seeing in the Middle East right now is, you know, people who a year ago would have said there's no way that, you know, in a year's time half the Middle East will be on fire and half the repressive regimes will be hiding in Nigeria. You know, no one would have said that, right? But because that situation hit a tipping point. And if you can understand, or at least make someone believe you understand why that happened, and show that something like that might happen somewhere else, you've got a much more powerful argument for what might on its own seem like not such a gigantic radical shift. Okay, any questions or worries about trends, norms, or tipping points?
Before we get a question, so I just want to run the forms.
Sure.
If you want to debate tonight, and or if you want to debate at Easter's, you need to have filled out one of these forms. I'll come around again to collect them and also distribute them. I've got about 5 minutes of questions. Yeah.
Sure. So, questions, and lastly I'll just say before I pull out other questions, we didn't talk about actually how you prep a case, as in what do you do with the half hour when you're sitting in the room with 2 other people you don't know, and how do you fill that time and come up with arguments. Didn't talk about it because I don't have time to do everything. So instead what I've done is I've made a printout of some stuff that's actually in that training guide, that the link is up there on the board now. I only have 20 copies of these, I didn't realize there'll be so many people, so you can, you know, whatever, fight to death over them, whatever. But they're up here. This explains a kind of blow-by-blow description of how you use the time, how you actually create ideas, how you create arguments. Okay, that's it. Anyone got questions or worries about basic case construction?
When you have a debate, like one of those esoteric debates that you talk about, like the grass is greener on the other side.
Yep.
If someone, like, what if one team identifies something like the grass is greener on the other side is about social struggle within society and trying to move up, and the other team comes up with a definition that's a totally different argument to that? And what do you do then?
You're having the nightmare that we talked about, right? So let's just talk very quickly about definitional challenges. Firstly, avoid them at all costs, right? The golden rule of definitional challenges is if you're the negative team, no matter what you prepped, right? I mean this literally, and I've done it, and I've seen it done, and it works. It works much better than the alternative. No matter what you've prepped as a negative team, whether you prep drugs and they are having a debate about guns, or whether you prepped a debate about North Korea and they've prepped a debate about, you know, fluffy bunny rabbits, whatever it is, if it's possible for you to debate under their definition and win, by that I mean, if there are arguments that their definition opens to you, which you think have at least a reasonable chance of being successful, then accept the definition and beat the bastards on their own terms. Because the moment that you challenge the definition, the debate's over, right? Your speaker scores will halve, your enjoyment of the debate will halve, and the adjudicator will start playing on their phone. Okay, so avoid it at all costs. But what do you do, right? So let's just quickly go through the rules for a definitional challenge. There's only one test, okay? We talked before about context and spirit of the motion, but in terms of the rules, there is only one ground, really, that you can fight a definition on. And that is that the definition your opponents have given you is not, quote, the most reasonable. Okay? And that doesn't mean that you can show that you've got a definition that's as reasonable. You have to be able to show that their definition is not the most reasonable, right? And that you have the most reasonable definition. Equally reasonable doesn't cut it. So it's actually not a particularly high bar, right, for an affirmative team that's even tried half-assedly to justify their definition by talking about the context, defining the debate reasonably by thinking about the spirit of the motion. If they've done that, then they're going to have a pretty good argument to say that they have the most reasonable, but that they have a reasonable definition. For you to say you have the most reasonable alternative is going to be pretty hard. So if you can't show you have the most reasonable, or they've broken one of the other fundamental rules, like they've time set, or they've unfairly place set, or we didn't talk about truisms and tautologies, but they're another sets of tests you can break, then you can't do it.
What do you do if they do like the whole thing on that place that you spoke about.
The Nagorno-Karabakh. You just do the best you can, right? You just make it up. This is what
But do you stand up and say this place is bullshit? I mean,
sure, you can, but bear in mind, adjudicators, well, mostly, like, they're not stupid. So if the topic was that we should grant rights to separatist movements, and the affirmative team say this is about the freedom fighters from the Nagorno-Karabakh, I'll probably be laughing their ass off when they say it's going to be pretty obvious that it's bullshit. But the adjudicator's going to think, what the fuck? Alright, so it's fine for you to say, okay guys, like, that's bullshit, but whatever, let's go, like, it's game time. That's fine, but don't go on and on and on about it, because the adjudicator's kind of sympathy for you drains away pretty quickly. So it's fine to make the point, this is crap, but you've really just got to knuckle down and do it. And this is what first principles is all about, right? So if you've never done a debate about, that we should have government-funded treatment for heroin, and the affirmative team set it up as saying there should be free and widely available naltrexone treatments for heroin addicts in every major population centre in this country. And you say, what the hell is naltrexone? You just have to win it, right? You just have to go into first principles and say, what is the clash? Right? What is the core clash? Forget all this stuff about heroin and naltrexone versus opiates versus morphine. What's the core clash? And the core clash in here is it's not a legitimate choice. We shouldn't be, we should be banning this, not regulating it, right? And you're trying to regulate it. We should be getting back to that basic principle of we need to squash usage and demand as much as possible, right? And you just win it with the details you don't have. But just really, really quickly, if you're going to run a definitional challenge, and all I can say is I've tried multiple times to tell you not to, this is how it works, right? So the first affirmative speaker gives their speech. I'll give you an example from an All Asians tournament, which operates under the similar rules to Easter's. And the topic, because people thought this was a good idea, and obviously it wasn't, was that we should play God. So the affirmative team said, when we say that we should play God, what we mean is that only God has the right to take life. But in this debate, we will be God. So therefore, we believe that the state, that's us, parliamentary style debating, we, the government, should have the right to take life, which we mean we should have the death penalty for people who do naughty things to children. So they run a speech about why the death penalty is good, appropriate, or whatever, and yada yada yada. The first speaker of the negative team gets up and says, I definitionally challenge. And by the way, if you're going to do it, you've got to do it straight away, right? You can't fuck around. If you don't definitionally challenge in the first 30 seconds, silence is consent, right? It's the only time. The only time you get away with saying that to a bunch of university students, silence is consent. Right? They bought you dinner, it's implied. Right? If you don't challenge, you accept. So, it's now to turn around and say, we're definitionally challenging on the grounds that their definition is not the most reasonable. It's not the most reasonable for this reason. That when they say that, they want to play God by taking life, we say, God, it's not reasonable to say that God takes life. God doesn't take life. And let me tell you, you can be the most holy, religious, awesome, God-fearing, church-going man out there. Of course, this was in Asia, so they were Muslims, but it doesn't matter. That whatever they are, if you're walking across the street on your way to donate your kidney to poor people, and a truck's hurtling down the street, God's not going to reach in and save you, right? God's not going to interfere. God is non-interventionist. So when the topic says that we would play God, it means they have to be non-interventionist. We, as the team that are not playing God, get to be interventionists, which means we are in favour of the death penalty and they are against it. I swear to God, this happened. Seriously, I just did. This is crazy. So that's nothing, right? That's just the definitional challenge. This is how the debate works. So they said, so, given our definition is that we are the pro-death penalty team, here are our arguments. And they repeat those arguments at the other team. But the rules say you have to even if, right? Which means halfway through the speech you have to stop and say, because there is a dispute about the definition, and even though we think we're right, it might be possible that we're wrong, and there's no ruling about this in the middle of the debate, we have to operate under the, even if you accept their definition, they're still wrong because, and then ran an anti-death penalty case. Now, you don't get any more time for this, right? You have to run two completely diametrically opposed cases in the same time you would have run one. Right? It's not easy, right? And no one does it well, which is why your speaker score is just implode. So, the second speaker for the affirmative team comes up and says, well, that's just bullshit. God takes life all the time. Have a look at all those evil infidels that get struck down all the time. It's just nonsense, right? How many bad people have got what they deserved in life? That's God interfering. So we say our definition's right. We are the pro-death penalty team. Here's our arguments against their death penalty case, and ran their arguments from the first half of their definition against the death penalty. But then said, but even if you accept their definition, they're still wrong because around their arguments that they've run under their even if about why the death penalty is bad. And the debate went on like that, right? And there's just there's no debate. Like, the debate is over, and everyone looks like an idiot. And it's a great story, but this was the grand final of the tournament. And as the judges, you've got to call it, right? And I'll tell you that for a debate where both sides ran exactly the same arguments for exactly the same amount of time, using exactly the same justifications, just opposite of time, we gave it unanimously the affirmative team because the negative team were being dicked. It's just as simple as that. So if you are going to challenge, that's what you have to do, right? It's not enough to just say your definition's bullshit, we're moving on to our definition. You have to justify why your definition is better. You have to argue under that definition. Then you have to, even if the debate under their definition, you have to do it under all the same amount of time. So, do you get my original point, which was the golden rule is don't challenge. Okay? Only challenge if the definition your opponents have set up is so completely unreasonable that the debate is fucked already. In which case, you have nothing to lose, fire away. But if there's even a chance that you can win under their definition, do it, and it's 10 times as sweet. Any last questions? Okay, thank you for your time.
Tim for coming in and giving up his time to train us. Tim is an incredibly successful, very accomplished debater, and so I'm sure we've all learned a lot from him coming in and sharing some of his expertise. Hopefully we'll have Tim coming in later on during the year to offer more training sessions, so make sure you come to those. You guys know how good they'll be. Tim has much knowledge. Considering how much information was in this presentation, we encourage every one of you to go online. With Tim's consent, we'll have it up online. So make sure you go on the website, watch it again. We'll have these slides emailed out to all of you, as well as having them up on the website in a place that's accessible to everybody. Look over them again, save them on your computer, consult them, read them, print them out, bring them along, and use them for the next couple of weeks and Easters, because I'm sure that'll help you heaps and help you get the most out of these sorts of presentations. So thank you, Tim, again.
Okay, so what we'll do now is announce the teams for the debate. There's no document camera in this theatre, so I'll just read them very loudly, so that you can find your teammates when you hear your team call. Just kind of raise your hand as you hear your name called. So, an affirmative team will be Daniel Tran. Good, keep it up. Ariel Zlichtikov Johnston and Kai Yuan Teng. Yeah, that's. Yeah. There you go. Cool. You guys are affirmative in room 100. The negative team will be Jamil Dew, Stephen Liu, and Simon Toe. And you guys are negative in room 100. In room 102, the affirmative team will be Manur Sikandar, Jeremiah Leong, and Philip Hilton. And the negative team will be Rosemary Barr, Daniel Golder, and Ben O'Shea. That's in room 102. In room 501, the affirmative team will be James Gray, Ming Kang Chen, and Henry Guo. The negative team, also in 501, will be Stephen Ward, Oscar Dane, and Mohammed Karat. That's room 501. The affirmative team for room 502 will be James Charuk, Hamish Williamson, and Henry Hamilton. The negative team will be Martin Kwok, Jess Clarence, and Brian Lee. That's room 502. In room 507, the affirmative team will be Christopher Weinberg, Alice Boa Endicott, and Louise Lawson. The negative team will be Lisa Drummond, Kathy Yu, and John Duong. That's room 507. In room 508, the affirmative team will be David Haynes, Yerult Kumbal Fur, and Dominic Seeker. The negative team will be Beryl Yan, Stephen Polisel, and Nyamka Bayan Monk. That's room 508. And finally, in room 605, the affirmative team will be Tim Schubert, Justin Kearney, and Tristan Beale. And the negative team will be Richard Hughes, Owen D'Souza, and Jimmy Jim. Is there anyone who wants to debate?
Steph's a Jude.
Steph?
No, Albert. Did you say Albert?
Albert.
Oh, sorry.
Okay. Is there anyone who wrote on the form they'd like to debate tonight but was not involved? Fantastic. Oh.